Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Frequently Asked Spiritual Questions video. We're live streaming on YouTube and over on my Facebook professional page. Once again, it seems like Facebook has made some changes and is moving the right direction, and I wanted to do a broadcast there live as well. So welcome to everyone who's tuning in on Facebook, as well as everyone who's tuning in on the YouTube channel. There's a link in the description. If you haven't already, I just want to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You could do that by clicking the little bit.ly link there. And let me see. Yep, I can push it here or describe it here. On the YouTube channel, you can click the logo. That's what that is right here in the corner, and that'll pop up, and then you can subscribe. Our focus today, and let me just mute the computer. I thought I'd already done that. Okay, there we go. Our focus today is on, Judy's already checking in with a question. I'll answer that here in just a second, Judy. Our focus today is on how an embodied transmission can be expressed through artistic endeavor. And when I mean artistic endeavor, what I mean when I say that is through any creative expression. And so Judy's checking in. Thanks for saying hi, Judy. It's not just through writing, but also through painting or drawing or really any creative expression. And what happens in the embodied transmission is that it becomes the thing that you create. It could be through recording, it happens while singing, and so on. It becomes a live source of transmission to your consciousness. So you can actually write something that then develops or evolves over time as your consciousness develops or evolves over time, so that the subsequent impact for people who are reading what you've written or experiencing your art is different over time because your consciousness has transformed and shifted and become more integrated. That's the broad strokes overview. The specifics about how to make this happen, at least the broad strokes specifics about how to make this happen in 3 steps, are the things that I want to share with you today. And actually, although I do transmission all the time, this isn't actually about communicating or being creative when we're in transmission together. This is about you expressing your embodied transmission. That is to say, the divine expression as you in whatever you're creating. And so Gary, thanks for checking in. I was just going to say, I won't know if you're here unless you say hi. And then Gary checks in on YouTube. Gary, thanks for saying hi. Thanks to everyone who's tuning in and participating either through the broadcast as we're doing this live or through the replay, either on YouTube, or we are once again live or sharing this video over on Facebook as well. So I want to outline these 3 kind of steps for you, and then happy to answer questions and dive into it at a deeper level. The first of these steps, and I'm going to do a little sketch here, and then I'm going to give you some examples. Let me see if I can. Angelica checking in. Hi, Angelica. It's wonderful to be with you. Thanks for being here. Let me see if I can. I'm going to do it this way so it's easier to see what I'm doing, even though my handwriting may leave a little bit to be desired. So the first step in an embodied transmission for something that you're creating is to be in a surrendered state. And it's a very specific surrendered state, surrendered to divine expression. Oops. Expression. And I want to share an example, a story of this. Now, we've talked about surrender a lot before. We've talked about divine expression. I don't think the things that I'm sharing are necessarily original or unique around that. It is very challenging for some people to move into a surrendered posture. And so I want to share with you a very simple illustration. And it actually comes from a person that I was working with some years ago who is a professional dancer in Europe. And she was asking me about, and to be clear, I am not a professional dancer. Okay, so the reason we were working together had absolutely nothing to do with what I might be able to offer her by way of insights around professional dancing. In any case, the um, the conversation we were having was around surrender, and she was asking me, "Can you explain what it really means to surrender and how I would surrender?" And this was a one-on-one um, session that I was facilitating for her. And I kind of closed my eyes and I saw this picture of her dancing intuitively, like just in my imagination. I don't think it was a particular person, just a form dancing. And I said to her, when you're dancing, who is doing the dancing? Are you in charge of the dance or are you being danced? And she said, I'm being danced. And I said, okay, so you have a consistent experience with surrender in your life already when you are being danced. Who or what would you say is dancing you? And I don't remember her exact language for it, but effectively what she was saying is the divine. God is dancing me when I'm dancing. And I said to her, now think about it, because in your process of learning how to dance, probably you had extraordinary gifts to begin with when you were very young. You had a natural instinct. And she said, yes, of course. And I kind of walked her through the various stages of her progression as a professional dancer, as I understand them, not as a dancer. But, I said, certainly you learn specific ways of dancing, certain ways to hold your body, to move your arms, and so on. And when those were new to you, they were new to your body. And over time, those began to become integrated and embodied at a deeper and deeper level. And even in the course of learning new choreography, there's something else that is present in that. And we kind of walk through all of those things. And the thing that I'm trying to refer to, I skipped a bunch of steps here as I'm recalling the story with you, but in the expression of the choreography is the expression of spirit, right? There's an individual who is dancing the dance. It's not just a robot that's dancing, it's an animated human being. And to my perspective, at least, the animating presence is the divine expressing now as that individual. And she had that experience. So when I say surrendered to divine expression, oh, I didn't even say two on my little notepad here, but let me just pull this up again here. When I say surrender to divine expression, I'm acknowledging that there's a lot of work that goes into that. And that isn't just something necessarily that you sit down one day and say, okay, I'm going to create an embodied transmission, an artistic expression. I'm not going to dance in this way, or I'm not going to write this book or paint or sing or whatever. There's a process to get to this place of being surrendered to divine expression. And then the second piece of this is embodied in the hips. And the best example that I can give to you about what it means to be embodied in the hips is, or one way that you might be able to evaluate that. Let me back up, because I didn't explain what's one way that you know you're surrendered to divine expression. When you accept everything exactly as it is. Now, that's the criteria for surrendered. Divine expression now is something that is dancing you, and the dance might be metaphorical or it might be literal. Okay, so then if we go to the second step, and that is to be embodied in the hips, how do we know when we're embodied in the hips? We know because we are completely present. And You might say to me, well, Ken, you can't be surrendered to divine expression if you're not totally present. And I would agree with you. But I think it's important to delineate this, to actually speak it as a step, because um, I'm describing it with words. I need to just close my eyes for a minute so I can see all the intuitive picture here, if you will. Surrender to divine expression involves an enormous amount of practice, just like dancing. A professional ballerina involves an enormous amount of practice. And when it comes down to it, that surrender to divine expression is no longer a thinking or a feeling activity. You're not out on stage in your embodied transmission thinking, here's what needs to happen. And the other thing about this is that many people have this idea that there needs to be an intention held around the embodied transmission associated with whatever their creative endeavor is. And I want to suggest to you that that has a very limited impact. And it does not, from my perspective, express, nor do I experience that as an embodied transmission or a divine expression, as fill in the blank, as you with your artistic expression. It has the energy of a thinking projection, right? So in any case, once we're embodied in our hips, we're in a very different perspective. We're not coming from a thinking perspective. We're not coming from a feeling perspective, not in our heads, not in our hearts. We're coming from, and this is really the third criteria here, we're coming from a being perspective. So we could say we create from the being perspective. And I just want to try to draw a picture of that, because what does that mean? It's sort of like last week, I think somebody said in our time together, I've never really understood what transmutation was until I had this experience. And here's the thing about embodied transmission. There's a tremendous amount of work associated with that I can facilitate. It's not something we can do in 30 minutes or 60 minutes, or even if we were going to hang out together for 10 hours or 4 hours. It's not going to happen like that. It's a profound process of integration. But here's the key to this profound process of integration. As we're integrating, we are in this process of enlivening, descending. The soul is animating everything. And in this resonance that's expressing, it's not the resonance of thoughts. It's not, oops, that's supposed to come. It wants to hide the thoughts. That's a weird picture. The thoughts are coming over here. It's not from the thoughts. Okay. It's not coming out of feeling either. It's really easy to think, oh, here's what divine expression as me is. I've got this idea. I'm going to be involved in this, whatever it is, right? Maybe it's a business proposition, and that involves an artistic creative expression. From my perspective, that's always true, right? There's always an artistic expression. I don't mean it necessarily, although this could certainly be true, that there's painting involved. But the artistic expression I'm referring to is the complete expression of who you really are in the world, to allow that to be seen, to allow that to express fully. So it's not coming from there, and it's not coming from a feeling either. In the feeling dynamic, and I'll draw another picture that I think will correlate to some of our earlier explorations over the last number of months around the levels of the ocean, the metaphor of the ocean as these various stages of consciousness, right? So we're not coming from a thinking or a disempowered dynamic. We're not coming from a feeling or an empowered dynamic. We're coming from a being perspective. And in this being perspective, not only are we completely present, but we're surrendered to whatever is expressing there. And there is not a filter, excuse me, there's not a filter that is engaging in the process trying to um, evaluate, does this make sense? So we're not thinking through, we're not editing what we're engaging in any more than the professional ballerina on stage is trying to edit. She feels her, I don't know if this is true, but I'm imagining she feels her body moving in a certain way. That's simply happening. I think I asked her this question, and I imagine that this was her answer, or it seems that I'm recalling it. But whether this is what she said or not, it seems like this might be true. It certainly is true in my own experience of it, not in dance, I assure you, but more in transmission when I'm teaching and so on, and in particular facilitating in transmission and silence. It's as if the divine is moving me or moving us. It's as if I'm able to witness or see that dynamic, that relationship unfolding, and all the work that is taking place between the divine and the individual or the group that I'm witnessing. In a dancing dynamic, it's the divine that is moving the dancer. The dancer is not thinking. She wasn't thinking through, oh, I feel God moving my body in this way, but I better think about it. It's just happening, probably without any thought whatsoever. I've long imagined that it would be fun to paint and express creatively in those types of ways. And I haven't, because I've been so hung up on my thinking about what that would look like, or do I have any technique? I have none. Or, all of those kinds of evaluation processes that we engage in from a thinking perspective. When it comes to an embodied transmission, the how of that expression is wholly a function of being completely embodied, totally present in it, coming from a being perspective, and then surrendered to divine expression. And whatever flows after that is that has as the carrying wave of resonance sort of built into the creative expression, the visual, the words that are spoken, the recording of that, the recording of the voice singing, all of these things, all of these various ways that we can be creative, that embodied transmission is there. And although we may look at the words and say, those words move me this way, or when I hear somebody singing in this way, that moves me, or when I watch someone dancing from that perspective, it moves me. And I believe those things are true. I also believe that a huge part of what is moving us is that embodied transmission that is contained within and under the actual artistic expression itself. And if we come from a place of thinking or trying to hold an intention, we block all of that. We're no longer present because we're focused on an expectation or an outcome that we think we need to manage and control. We're not in a surrender dynamic. I meant to do this. We're not in a surrender dynamic. We're in a place where we're trying to control and affect what is unfolding rather than allowing that to express whatever that expression is. So I just want to check in for a minute here and see if there are any questions that are coming up, if there's anything around this that you'd like me to dive into at a deeper level. I've really hit upon the major themes that I wanted to cover in our time together today. And I also want to make sure that this is a meaningful resource for you too. Gary is checking in. He's saying everything looks great and sounds great on Facebook Live. Thanks for the feedback, Gary. I'm glad to hear it. Couldn't find me on Periscope or Twitter. That's because I'm not on there today. I decided to share exclusively on YouTube and come back on Facebook. It's been a number of months since I've been on Facebook. I thought I'd engage with our community on Facebook a little bit as well. Coming to a more embodied place within myself as a spiritual messenger. And a lot of that dissonance that I was feeling about the polarization that was taking place on the Facebook platform, it's not that it's not there. It's simply that I have done what I believe is an enormous amount of integration and embodiment work around it. And I feel much more comfortable in an embodied transmission and sharing that in the Facebook environment now. So that's the reason I'm back on Facebook. I don't see any other comments coming in, so I'm just gonna close my eyes here and check in a little bit and see if there's anything else intuitively that feels important to cover before we wrap up today. I will say, for everyone who's watching this on replay, whether you're watching on Facebook or you're watching on YouTube, I really encourage you to comment, ask questions, engage through the comments on the replay, certainly for everyone who's watching live as well. I will respond personally to you. I'll respond on Facebook and I'll respond on YouTube. And your questions and comments may inspire a future broadcast in some future week, a topic that I either write about or something that I explore together here on the channel in the live stream, in the weekly live stream. The other thing that I'm kind of interested in, and I'm in the process of sort of understanding and evaluating, and if you have feedback around this, I would really love to receive your perspective on this, and you can do so in the comments. Earlier, I was doing my broadcasts at 5 p.m. Eastern, and I moved them a little bit later to 6 p.m. Eastern. It worked a little bit better for me for a couple weeks, but when I look at my schedule going forward, I've got flexibility. And so I'd love to know if you have a time preference, 5 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Eastern. I happen to be in the Mountain Time Zone. So for me, that's either 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because I'm here in Fort Collins, Colorado. This is my home base, where I'm coming to you live. Sky is sharing a question here. I'm going to put it up on the screen. Would you say, it's great to hear from you, Sky. Thanks for being here. Would you say that a person with a public charisma has an artistic talent coming from embodied transmission to communicate, like Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King? Yeah, I think without a doubt, Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King were sharing and communicating from an embodied place, a profoundly embodied place. And I guess your question is, with public charisma and artistic talent. And what I would say is that the question of whether the embodied transmission relates to talent or charisma, from my perspective, it doesn't relate to those things. Some people have extraordinary charisma, some people have extraordinary talent, but all of us are capable, including those of us who don't have any public charisma or talent, recognizable talent. All of us have within us, or all of us are in our fully integrated state, an embodied messenger. And as this is just my language on it, Sky, of course. So as an embodied messenger, the divine has a message and artistic expression, if you will, as us, as you, as me, as each and every human being on the planet, that is by its very nature an embodied transmission. And that is not dependent on public charisma or recognizing an artistic talent. So without a doubt, from my perspective, Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, yes. And it's interesting because I would suggest that we all have a sense of that. And I'm just trying to see if I can articulate how we might reflect on that in a way that we can all recognize. I mean, for example, for me, I can feel an embodied transmission from someone else. I feel it in lots of different ways. My hands and feet buzz, my mouth buzzes if they're speaking. Sometimes I cry. There are lots of different ways that I experience that. I can feel resonance throughout my entire body in very particular ways. And I'm wondering, and share in the comments, not just Sky, but everyone, do you have a way of feeling that? And you may not have been using this language that I'm using, and it doesn't have to be my language if that doesn't resonate with you, whatever language does. But I'm guessing that we all have a way of recognizing that embodied transmission. And if you would, maybe share in the comments, what is your way of recognizing or experiencing an embodied transmission? Because mind you, what I'm talking about here is not dependent on a healing transmission or a healing session, or, something that is recognized as ostensibly or primarily as a spiritual transmission is the word that keeps coming up. I'm trying to think of another way of describing it. So for me, those two things they don't need to link up. An embodied transmission can take place in any context, any context. So, well, any embodied context, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. In any artistic form, it can take place. So this is a great question, Sky. Thanks for bringing it up. It's wonderful to hear from you here. Let me see if I can hide this comment. Judy's saying she prefers this time. Susan likes the change to 6. Gary's saying hi. Susan is saying the change to 6 works really well this week, so I could take in another course earlier, but otherwise the time doesn't matter. Okay, great. That's all wonderful feedback. Thank you. And Angelica is saying, is surrender like energy flow flowing freely as a pattern? That's an interesting question, Angelica. So I can see how that would be true, right? Because I can see in certain artistic expressions there would be a recognizable pattern or an identifiable pattern. But I also think that that's not always the case. So maybe if there is, if you have more that you can clarify around this and give me sort of a bigger context or a smaller context and be a little bit more specific with your question, I think that might help me answer it, Angelica. Because I'm thinking of examples, right? I'm thinking of an example where the recognizable pattern of an embodied transmission shows up melodically in music. Yeah, without a doubt. And you might listen. I can imagine listening to a song or a melodic expression being communicated by an embodied transmission and as a disembodied transmission, and the feeling experience would be very different. In fact, here's an interesting example. I wonder if anyone else read this profile on Keith Jarrett today. I think it was posted today. Today is we're the 21st of October, 2020. If you want to look it up, and on replay, I'll do my best to modify the links to include a link to this article to make it easy for you to find it. The New York Times did a profile on Keith Jarrett. And if you listen to jazz, I'm sure you're familiar with Keith Jarrett. Perhaps you can tell from my grin, I listen to jazz. I actually used to play jazz, believe it or not, and as a trombone player. And but I never had the kind of talent that anyone you would recognize or know had, not even close. In any case, I so appreciate the embodied transmission of Keith Jarrett. And they were actually describing it so beautifully in the article. If I had the article up right now, I would read the part of it where they're describing the embodied transmission. So forgive me for if there's inaccuracies or I'm filling in stuff that wasn't actually written in the article or that Keith Jarrett didn't actually say. But at one point, the person who's writing the profile is describing in some of his concerts, he is playing something for the first time. He's composing with the audience, and he's describing the conditions Oh my God, it was so moving when I was reading this. It's so interesting that I didn't think of this until now. And your question is bringing this up, Angelica. Beautiful question. Um, he was describing what I would describe as the energetic container that he steps into as, my words, an embodied messenger whose method of communication, to my way of describing it, is and I don't know Keith Jarrett personally, so I'm not violating confidence or anything. He's not a client. I don't know him at all. I'd love to know him. Keith, say hi sometime. I'd love to connect. Uh, he is communicating through verbalization and also through the piano. The piano becomes this extension of that which is breathing him. This is all my language. I have no idea if Keith might be driven nuts by this description. Maybe other people don't like this, but I'm trying to describe the answer to this question and waiting for more. Let me see if there's Angelica's leaving me. She's leaving me twisting in the wind here, trying to figure out how to answer this without giving me any other help. Okay, it's all right. I could do this, Angelica. I can get us there. So in my way of experiencing what they were describing in this article, and certainly my way of experiencing Keith Jarrett, who I've only ever experienced through recording, is the piano is becoming part of him. And the way I read in this article today, this experience that Keith has, everyone becomes part of that expression. Everyone. So it's this collective, not just experience, but it's a collective embodied transmission that is being expressed or channeled through Keith and his fingers and his vocalizations. Oh, brings up tears. It's so profound and beautiful. So there's a very specific example of an embodied transmission, and there are tons of them, right? Lots and lots of recordings of Keith's work. And I can't remember if he's commenting on this or the person who's writing the article is talking about in different places in Europe and different communities at different times. There's a different energy present and so on. And that, if we go back to the three, from my perspective, the three conditions that are necessary for an embodied transmission are surrendered to divine expression, embodied in the hips, that is totally present, and then expressing or creating from the hips, not from a thinking perspective, not from a feeling perspective, from a being perspective, wherein there is no delineation. I don't even want to try to articulate that further. I'm happy to dive into it more if there are more questions around this. Great question, as always, Angelica. Wonderful to hear from you. Sky is saying a preference to 3 p.m. Mountain Time. Great. And Terry is saying hi on Facebook. Terry, it's wonderful to hear from you. Thanks for saying hi. Oh, Angelica is helping me out here. Yeah, when the ukulele is playing me. Yeah. Yeah. So I can see, I can hear, I can feel those patterns that you're describing. Yeah. The beauty of it is that it's the discernment of this. It's not, let me say this differently. The determination of an embodied transmission, I mean, others may comment on it, others may reflect on it, but the most important experience of it is yours. This is I get so excited about working with spiritual messengers. Oops, didn't mean to kick the stand that the computer's on here. This is why it's so exciting for me, because it's not about the truth, right? And this is really easy to perceive in the context of art that is, a visual art that is expressed, or art that is a function of a vocalization, or in Keith Jarrett's case, playing piano. It's maybe more challenging for us to understand that or conceptualize that when it comes to, say, writing words on a page, that somehow appears to be a more limited, or it might appear to be to some, to be a more limited container. And what I'm suggesting to you, and I'm doing more than suggesting it, but I'm just wanting to stay in this place of encouraging your exploration rather than trying to issue definitive edicts about this. Although I feel like I could talk definitively about this at great length. It's such an extraordinary and unlimited expression that is available in whatever artistic manner you feel called to. When the ukulele is playing you, as you said, Angelica, or the ballerina is being moved, or the spirit is moving as we sit together in transmission and silence, or in writing a book, or et cetera, recording a video, right? There's like one of the things that happens in when we're in transmission together is there is an embodied transmission of that transmission. It's appears to be sort of captured or contained within the recording, wherever that is on a hard drive spinning somewhere, right? And showing up as video or hearing voice in the case of time that we might share together. But actually, from my perspective, what's happening is that embodied transmission is taking place between the divine and you. And what is unfolding in that space is outside of time and space, in the same way that there is an embodied transmission in what is written, or in Keith Jarrett's piano, or in the vocalizations of a singer, or the art that is expressed through painting, and so on. Okay, let's see. Rena says, 5 p.m. Eastern is better for me. So happy to be in this field. Beautiful. And Terry is saying, you're vibing high. Yeah, it's so I am also right now, I am in a surrendered place to divine expression, right? So, I have this idea. I want to talk about this. I want to share. And then we just slip into this place together, and these things begin to express, and we can look at them, and we can explore together, and we can go wherever the conversation leads us, because we're just becoming more and more present to that essence that underlies everything else. That's my experience of what's going on. And in that place, there's an infinite level of support. There's an infinite amount of resonance. One of the things that I hear often from spiritual messengers when I'm working with them one-on-one and also teaching in group dynamic is, how will I know that my gifts will express in a way that is predictable, or the gifts that God expresses through me will express in a way that's predictable? That is to say, what if I hang my shingle out and somebody comes and says, okay, whatever it is you do, fill in the blank, I'll give you some money or whatever, and let's do a session, whatever that means, together. And how do I know that whatever it is that God does through me is going to show up? And the beauty is that when you're in surrendered to divine expression embodied in your hips and your being presence, that's all there is. There is nothing else that can show up. And it's not a matter of showing up, it's always there. The key is that when we're surrendered to divine expression embodied in our hips and in that being expression, then we are opening up to that aspect of us that is expressing in that way. And that is embedded then, or contained within the transmission of whatever we create. And the other thing that I mentioned early on that I kind of want to loop back to at this point is this reminder that embodied transmission then is a live conduit to your consciousness. So as you integrate, as you continue doing your inner work spiritually, and you become more aware, you become more embodied, etc., more integrated, that expression is still or continues to express in live form through whatever the creative expression was, even if it's I was going to try to look around for a book to wave in your face, but you don't need the visual. Even if it's, words on a physical piece of paper in a book that was printed, 15 years ago, the transmission contained within that book is connected to your consciousness. Beautiful. Uh, Edie says, I want to hear that, Angelica. Awesome. So, Angelica, the thing is, when you come out and you start sharing, I didn't know you played the ukulele. So now will you share it? Will you share it with us? I'd love to share it with the community if you want to share that. That's a great question. Okay, let me just close my eyes and see if anything else is coming in. I'm noticing there are some likes and some feedback coming in on Facebook. I'm so grateful for that. I appreciate that. I made the invitation at the beginning. I'll make it again now. If you haven't already, I certainly invite you to subscribe to the YouTube channel and to click the bell to be notified when you do so. And you'll see that in the description. There's a little bit.ly link at the end of the description. You can click that and that'll make you a subscriber and click the bell. Or there's also on YouTube, my little logo is floating here on the video screen, but just on YouTube. And I think that's there in all the platforms, or maybe it's up there in the other platforms, but on here on YouTube, if you click it, that also will make you a subscriber. And I would love, if the video resonates with you, give it a thumbs up or a like or whatever the right way to ask for that is. But I want to close my eyes here and see if there's anything else coming in. And if you have a question about this topic around embodied transmission, as a spiritual messenger, as an artist, and anything else that might be coming up, I'd be more than happy to address that with you before we wrap up for today. I just want to check in intuitively and see if there's anything else. So here's the thing. I just want to kind of give you some real-time feedback about my experience. So for me, I refer to the body as the intuitive guidance system. And when I'm teaching about the intuitive guidance system, all of it means something really important, right? And so right now, the experience I'm having is my hands and feet are buzzing and tingling. My crown is buzzing like crazy. There's just this incredible presence here. And this enlivening presence is within all of us and being enlivened with us and within us. And right. And some people sitting here or watching this video are thinking, why are my eyes so tired? Why do I feel like I'm going to sleep? And someone else is watching this and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm having all these creative ideas and it doesn't have a darn thing to what he's talking about. And I just better start writing these things down really quick. And someone else, right? And that's the point. The way the divine expresses in each of us is unique and profoundly different and so beautiful. And when we are in that embodied place, when the transmission of our embodied presence, of our divine, of the divine presence, it's not mine or yours or ours, it is the divine expressing as us, as you. When that is what is coming through in that embodied transmission of whatever your artistic expression is, whatever needs to be enlivened in those that gather to experience that is exactly what is enlivened. It's like we're all off the hook. We don't have to worry. Sure, I'd love to be, maybe less dorky or whatever in the way that I show up on YouTube in the video. And, wouldn't it be neat if I could quote all sorts of things off the top of my head? But you know what? I am who I am. And I think it's much, certainly for me, it's more comfortable to be able to show up as who I am. And as I become more comfortable with who I am, I allow that raw expression to come through. The embodied transmission is more fully expressed as a result of that. And I'm not trying to say me here. I'm simply using that as an example. In the same way, I'm sure we could look at in the progression of Keith Jarrett's career, as he has become more and more fully embodied, the depth of transmission that flows through his music is more and more profound. And as he opens up to that, it has become more and more complete, that embedded transmission. And so it is for each of us. It's not a function of a particular characteristic or trait, just if we follow these three things. Okay, I don't see any other questions coming up. I'm not getting anything else intuitively to give voice to. I can say this much. It has been a blast to share this time with you. I hope this has been meaningful, important, helpful for you in some way, whether it related to the topic I'm sharing or you got inspired by something that had nothing to do with what I was saying as you were listening to this. Spirit moves us in the most extraordinary ways. And it is such an honor to sit with you in that space, an honor to sink in and to be and to explore and to be with that unfolding, extraordinary expression of divine presence and resonance that exists within all of us without exception. I'm looking forward to being with you again a week from now for the next gathering here on the live stream. I'll pick up and do this again. I think on Facebook, it looks like part of the community is responding and interacting there. That's beautiful. I'm grateful for that interaction. If you're looking for a way to go in deeper with this material and lots of other important spiritual stuff, especially as a messenger, the deep dive virtual retreat that I'm facilitating tomorrow, there's a link in the description. Might be something you'd be interested in checking out. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource, an extraordinary group of people, made all the more so by your presence if you feel drawn to be part of that group. In any case, for now, so grateful for the chance to connect, in deep, deep gratitude for the opportunity to be fully present together, to sit and resonate and explore this and many other important topics. Until we're together again, peace and bye for now.